All right, everybody, welcome. It's Friday. We've made it. We've made it. Welcome to the show. It's a flawed man of God. I'm your host, Stuart Davis, here to bring you tonight's show. I'm a deacon at a small church just outside of Richmond, Virginia. I'm not a pastor, not a biblical scholar, and I haven't been to seminary. I'm not here to try get you to try to join my church or donate to any special cause. What I'm here to do is talk about God, talk about Jesus, talk about the Holy Spirit, talk about a wide variety of different topics, current events, and issues, and how they relate to us as Christians. Giving my take, one that I think is reflective of your average Christian guy. I've been a Christian all my life, 40 years non-denominational Protestant. I don't subscribe to any particular doctrine or denomination, just in the word daily trying to get it right. Sometimes I'm going to get it right, sometimes I'm going to get it wrong, but either way, you're going to see me here when I can, giving you my honest opinion on things. So, if you are somebody who is interested in learning more about Christianity, if you are curious about what it's all about, maybe there's a voice in the back of your mind just wondering if there's more to life than just this existence here on earth. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you here. Hopefully, you can get something out of what we're discussing, what you hear here. And like I said, it's going to be a very relaxed layperson approach to things. I'm not going to sit here and give you, different writings from however many years back or college professors and all this other stuff that's relevant, stuff that's important, stuff that can help you educate yourself more. But we're just talking about the day-to-day stuff. We're talking about the fundamentals, the basics, and just living the Christian life, right? So that's what you're going to see here, and maybe that can help give you a more honest, a more average, normal person exposure to Christianity. Because I'm not a pastor, I'm not sitting here from a pulpit talking to you. Uh, I'm I'm just providing an area for you to learn if you need to. This channel was created mostly with you in mind. So please, if you hear, give this show a try, and let me know how I'm doing and how it affects you. Keep coming back, and hopefully what I give you here will help springboard you onto a bigger and relevant relationship with Christ. If you are already a Christian and you just enjoy Christian topics and discussions, welcome as well. We've got a great group of folks in here in this chat who are ready to give me their thoughts on things as we discuss them. On many things, and I want you to join that as well. Tell me where I'm doing what I'm doing right, where you disagree. Let me know. If you have a particular insight, experience with whatever it is we're talking about. Maybe it's a piece of scripture we're going over. Maybe if, like it's tonight, it's a topic on some church working, some church business. Maybe you've got some impressions that you'd like to share. Whatever it is, probably got questions. Bring it to us. Bring it to us in the chat. There's guys there who are right in your position as a beginner, as a regular attender. There are folks in here who know more than I do. We want all types. And we run it very similar to a Wednesday night study group or a Sunday school. And like I said, come as you are. Come as you are. And with that said, it's Friday. Normally we do our open topics, but we're going to spin that off a little bit differently tonight because, well, this is only the second stream this week. Good night, guys. But the stream is getting, I was talking to my wife about this a little bit earlier, the stream is getting gradually more and more exposure. Gradually more and more, some more hits. I went, for the longest time, about a year ago, right after the Great Cata stream, I was getting about a dozen views a night. A dozen views per stream. And that has gradually gotten to where it's about 2 dozen a night. And the last week, or let's say the past 2 weeks, last week worth of streams, because it's been about 6 streams since March 31st, only one of my streams has been under 30 views. I know these numbers aren't wowing everybody. They're not knocking your socks off, but it's gradual improvement. And guess what, guys? Y'all are still here. Y'all are still here, and we're still having great conversations. Still having great conversations. And these are here for whoever. Whenever they find these videos, they will see us and our interactions and whatever knowledge we can impart and whatever hijinks. But tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the Southern Baptist Convention. We touched on it a little bit, but I thought that Megan Basham is a gal that I follow on Twitter, for what it's worth, from Twitter, because every once in a while, and I'm not saying this isn't that she's not consistent, but I'm saying every once in a while she does an article that I'm interested in, and she usually goes in depth to the level and degree I need to at least form a somewhat informed opinion on, which is something that you don't often get in journalism these days. She writes for the Daily Wire and a couple of other other publications. In this particular one, she's writing for the American Reformer, and she gives it from the perspective of somebody like me. We're going to talk somebody like me, somebody who is not a modernist, not into egalitarianism. I'm not a big fan of David French, not a big fan of Rick Warren. I'm not a big fan of Andy Stanley. Don't want these folks really representing or being an ambassador of our faith. You can hear a little background noise. I'm on a new computer, so hang on a second. How's that coming through? Now, my voice is going to be a little scratchy, but I'm sure that's not what you're hearing, because wait, hang on. Let me make sure I'm on my mic. Yeah, maybe I'm on the camera mic. Hold on. Hang on. Yeah, I'm on the webcam. Test. Okay, what are you hearing now? Does this sound more like the normal stuff? Because I was on the webcam mic. I'll let you you guys tell me. Boom. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it, sir. With the assist. Anyway, these are folks I don't want being ambassadors of the faith because they don't do a good job representing it. They say problematic things. They have problematic attitudes. They have things about them that it feels like it's more important that they get their message across as opposed to the message across. And generally, like I said, she's got a very similar expectation on what should be, what's good, what's wholesome in the faith, and what is not. Even though she writes for Daily Wire. Sorry, guys. So I went from being sick last Saturday with that stomach bug to going straight into my hay fever. Right in my hay fever. And these cold sores showing up. It's it's been a hell of a ride. But that's fine. Get it out of the way.
Get it out of the way so when we're at Road Rage this week or next weekend, it'll be I'll be over it all. I'm excited about that. It is what it is. All right, let's go over the chats. Nico's first. Blaine's Escape Corner is second. Welcome, Blaine. Welcome, Nico. Nernath, 11th. Think about it. Only based people get this joke. Matt Felty is here and helping out with the audio. Dresden's here. How's it going? MR, I am not. I arrived precisely when I mean to. Emmanuel says, what's going on? Are we going to talk about the training pastor thing? No, but get your kids off of Mr. Beast's show. I pulled my kids off of that on YouTube after that whole thing broke loose. Good night. Man, just what I told a friend of mine, because I put it out on Facebook. I was like, hey, guys, the time to get your kids off of Mr. Beast's show right now is yesterday. Yesterday or last week. Last week was when you should have gotten your kids off of Mr. Beast, as this whole drama starts spiraling out of control. This would not be as big of an issue if kids weren't the target audience. If kids weren't the target audience, this wouldn't be as big of an issue, but it is, and that changes the whole perspective on things. At first, it would just be funny, and we could make jokes, and we could talk about how it's, the weirdos and what fame seems to do to people. But in this case, there's a lot of influence on kids, and the sad thing is, if parents aren't watching, if normal people aren't on Twitter, number one, normal people aren't on Twitter or paying attention to this. So if you're not paying attention to what your kid's watching, like not just the content, like Mr. Beast or Mr. Beast or Dude Perfect, some of these guys, their content is mostly benign and it's entertaining. Folks like Preston Plays also, it's kid friendly. It's kid friendly. They get it in it. I think it's kind of weird seeing grown men make content for kids, but I guess somebody's got to do it, right? I think that's better than putting your kids in front of a camera and have them perform for money. To me, that's weird. That's a personal thing. But you don't know when the weird stuff's going to hit, where somebody's going to have a crisis, or somebody's going to go off the deep end, or somebody's going to show their true colors as as a predator, or dare I say it, groomer. But these things can and will happen. Even on YouTube Kids, you have to be careful of it. So, again, if you're not paying attention as a parent, because you've got a full-time job and you've got other things you're worrying about, taking care of the house, getting the kids to their sporting events, being involved in church, all the things that come along with being a husband, mother, parent, running a household. You think you've got something under control with your kids. It's you need there are reminders out there that you can never spend enough time making sure that you are checking their content. So I put it out there for folks who may not know. Buddy of mine said, I just looked into it, which is a shame. My son's a huge fan of Mr. Beast, but here we go. He said, here we go. We've got another case of this stuff going on. There you go. We've talked about the pastors of non-traditional, non-biblical sexual orientation and behavior. I'm sure we'll get into it again, but that's not tonight's. Well, it will be a little bit. So it will be a little bit. This has more to do with the ego, with the problems in the SBC, the Southern Baptist Convention, and the ego of Rick Warren, and how that's really hurting that's really hurting Southern Baptists and Southern Baptist churches. Because Rick Warren's a very popular guy. He's done he's sold a lot of books, and he's trained a lot of pastors, and he's a very important person. He is very quick to tell you exactly how important he is to everything. He's bigger than every seminary. So that's just giving you a sneak peek. If you have not already watched it, and this does make you more curious about it, go search through my content, look for my Rick Warren episode. I go through some of his quotes. It is insane. And I didn't know much about him until I started digging. Not impressed. Not impressed at all. All right, and then we got the stuff there. That's right. Thank you for doing the bit. What bit? What bit? Yeah, when you think things are safe and then it's the bait and switch, it's real. Have kids read books. You don't have this problem. Yes, right. If you've already read it, it doesn't change. Mr. Rogers did it. It's okay. Mr. Rogers said, Mr. Rogers started calling God a she. That's hold up. When did he do that? Everybody's a disappointment. This is why the classics and great works are great. Exactly. All right. This is going to be long to cover. This is a long article. It is 6,000 words. Let's see what we can do with this. And let's go over this. And this is somebody, the subject of her article, the guy trying to find answers in this crazy world, is from not too terribly far from here, but in a place, and actually his viewpoint is surprising from that place that he is, which is Arlington, Virginia. If I can get him on this show, I absolutely will. Because this man has dove into the belly of Southern Baptist Convention politics. And they're going to be coming, and they already have started coming for him after this. So, this is Megan Basham. Like I said, it's in the American Reformer. The link is in the description. We're going to discuss it. Mr. Smith goes to the convention. This came out this past week, and like I said, very good. This is a very good piece, in my opinion. You can make your own decision. In May of 2022, Mike Law, pastor of Arlington Baptist Church in Virginia, sent an email to the executive committee of the SBC. As the only full-time staff member of a church of about 100, so not much smaller at all than my church, he had never had any interaction with his national leadership before. So he began with a chipper greeting, introducing himself and his congregation, followed by a straightforward question. Is a church that has a woman serving as a pastor deemed to be in friendly cooperation with the Southern Baptist Convention? Now, this is something that has come up often because there have been churches out there that have been pushing the boundaries in almost every denomination. In Lutheranism, in Anglicanism, Methodists, it's rampant in Methodists. It's rampant with the Anglicans. It's rampant in non-denominational churches, unfortunately. But there is very clear scriptural instructions not to do this, because we are gifted with different strengths and responsibility and roles that we are to play within our lives and within the church. What's most important is how are we running our church? Home to some 47,000 churches and 13 million members, So one small church of about 100 members is a very, very, very small slice of the SBC pie. I hope your parents travel safe and they have a fun trip. It's a lot to see over there. The SBC's status as the largest Protestant denomination in the U.S. is due in large part to its loose structure, because that's how we Americans do it. Don't tell me what to do. Rather than a top-down hierarchy, it's more of a casual association of churches who agree on doctrine and pool their money to fund missions, seminaries, and various charitable endeavors. Its leaders have no power to tell churches what to teach, where or how to operate, or who to hire. The only authority they have is to manage the billion plus in unrestricted funds they receive, and set the terms of who gets to be a member. Though its contributions may have been small, Arlington Baptist was nonetheless a contributor in good standing, and its pastor was inquiring whether since Article 6 of the denomination's Statement of Faith asserts that, quote, the office of pastor is limited to men based on 1 Timothy 2, 9 through 14, and 3, 1 through 7. A church could remain in the club if it violated this doctrine. He's asking, this is our article. This is an article for the Statement of Faith. This is what they say. Office of pastor is limited to men based on scripture here. Bing, boom, boom. So if you violate that, are you still part of the SBC? Law explained that his understanding was that a church with a woman pastor would not qualify what the SBC calls a quote unquote friendly cooperation, because that requires a faith and practice that closely identifies with the Baptist faith and message, the SBC's name for their statement of faith. Churches that affirm homosexual behavior and marriage have been disfellowshipped for falling afoul of the BFNM in the past. Why would this point of doctrine be any different? It's a good point. I would say on the surface they seem different because one is a Levitical law that's been hashed out throughout Christian history, and one is more based off of structural rules and procedural rules that were put in place as the early church of Christianity was getting started, but also commandment from something instructed by Paul, who is acting as an intermediary between God and the Christians, right? And that was in line with the traditional roles and responsibilities given to us by God since Adam and Eve. But why is that the case? And what we'll find out more of that as we go along. He finished by thanking the committee for its service and said he looked forward to their answer. He would never get one. Speaking through other means, the response Law received from VP of Communications Jonathan Howe explained that determinations of friendly cooperation are made by the Credentials Committee, not the Executive Committee. So if he wanted to report a church for having a woman pastor, that was where he should turn. Law wrote back, apologizing for not being clear the first time. He knew where churches could be reported, but was only asking about the general principle. Did the committee agree with the BFNM's position on women in the pastorate? And did that belief guide their decisions? So, yeah. So the first thing back was, it's almost like the automated response you get back when you make when you're calling some customer service line, or the person just doesn't understand where you're trying to go. Oh, are you trying to report a violation? Then you need to go to this group. No. I know where to go if there's an issue. What I'm trying to find out is this an overarching principle that we're holding fast to? Right? I'm not trying to report anybody. I'm trying to get an answer on are we holding fast to this article? Nunez said women pastors are like koalas. They don't have the qualifications. They might have chlamydia. Too far. Yeah, well. Some male pastors could have chlamydia too. But you're right. They don't have the qualifications. And so what to skip through here. Boom, boom, boom. He gets caught in this feedback loop of them trying to go, well, if you want to report somebody, you got to go to these people. He's like, I'm not trying to report anybody, though I could if I wanted to, because to law, the confusion lay in the fact that the committee had not been speaking through their actions. In just a 5-mile radius of Arlington Baptist, I had noticed 5 other SBC churches that had female pastors on staff, he tells me. Further, far from exhaustive research, turns up 170 more. In Northern Virginia, shocking! Colleagues shared that when they had reported churches in the areas for the same issue, the Credentials Committee took no action. Then there were whispers that the various SBC leaders themselves attended churches where women act as pastors. In fact, one blog cited Hal's wife as one of them. Interesting. So now we're starting to cut to the core of it. This is a rule that we have in place, but we've ignored it for the most part because it could make us feel uncomfortable, and maybe some of us aren't holding fast to that ourselves. Emmanuel says, man seems interesting, but not going to lie, it's a lot of bureaucracy. I'm grateful you're here to make it interesting. This lot of bureaucracy is why I'm glad I am part of an independent, non-denominational church. Our bureaucracy is our own. There's pros and cons to that. I feel like that with the way I look at that, the way I look at things, the way we run our church is on us. It's not on some unknown, barely present bureaucracy or hierarchy trying to tell us what they know what's best. We're ultimately responsible for running our church the way it should be. The buck stops with us, right? The way I think of most women pastors is like I think what women did to drinking, banning it, and trying to snuff anything out that goes against them. I'll show you why. Because we've talked about this before, Emmanuel, but not since you've been here. And maybe not since most of the group has been here. And Mars says, got the ass. They say people in these corporate positions have high tolerance for deadlock and doing nothing. Hey, I like that sometimes. They're also surprisingly blithely unaware of issues that go on under their nose. But not in this case, Nernaeth, as we'll find out. MR, keep it up. But while Law's next email to senior members of the Credentials Committee produced no better results, their response did clarify why his query was being met with stonewalling and unasked for directions on how to report churches. I believe your question is in reference to Saddleback Church, the registration secretary informed him. Because of this, he said the committee would be, quote, unable to give a response, end quote. Who is Saddleback Church, you might ask? With 23,000 members spread across 14 campuses, not to mention extension groups around the world that attend services online, Saddleback could hardly provide a greater contrast to Arlington Baptist, where Law himself stuffs sermon outlines into Sunday bulletins and makes the spaghetti for Wednesday night Bible study. Basically, small town church, very similar to mine, versus one of the mega churches in America. Saddleback Church is huge. It's huge. Bigger. You can argue they're bigger. I don't know the numbers, but they're big. Bethel big. Hillsong big. Joel Osteen big. With an equally problematic pastor. The megachurch's founding pastor, Rick Warren, is the author of The Purpose-Driven Life, one of the best-selling books of the last few decades. known for rubbing shoulders with heads of state at the United Nations and World Economic Forum, and for counting top bureaucrats like former NIH Director Francis Collins, the COVID, among his personal friends. Warren has made it plain he considers himself more of an asset to his denomination than his denomination is to him. We don't need the Southern Baptist Convention, he recently told Christianity Today's editor-in-chief, Russell Moore, who's also a jerk, during a podcast interview. They need the 6,000 purpose-driven churches that are in our fellowship. That's just a wee bit, just a wee bit, tip of the iceberg of the attitude and the hubris that you're going to get from every Rick Warren soundbite. Now, when they talk about the purpose-driven life, about 20 years ago, this purpose-driven life was huge. It was a part of a lot of non-denominational and Baptist curriculum. I don't know where it went outside of that. I just know that a lot of churches were studying it. It was very similar to the Left Behind series. It was a big thing. It was a big thing. I've actually never read The Purpose-Driven Life. Never felt interested in doing it. I was very loosely, I was very, hang on. I was very loose in my affiliation with organized church at that point. And what study groups I was being part of weren't studying that at the time. But the people who I know who were parts of those, people I go to church with today, were reading this stuff. So there you go. But here we go. Here we go with Rick Warren. He's hobnobbing with politicians of all makes, and she notes because she knows it's going to score points. This is Francis Collins. One of the first streams I did with Eric Rollon, we were talking about Francis Collins and pastors talking about COVID and coordinating with the NIH on COVID measures. MR said, I hear a David. MR, of course, the WEF. Of course, the WEF. Exactly. I knew some of y'all were going to pick up on that. Nernath, Rick Warren, more like Rick, we're in trouble. Everyone I know who raved about it is messed up. Which is part of the I think is part of the problem. But I mean, I don't have that experience with a lot of people. I think it takes a little bit of recentering after that because it gives you it. I don't know. I haven't read it, but my impression is if it came from this man, it probably gives you less than scripturally accurate outlooks on life and faith. But he says, we don't need the SBC. They need us. And all of my churches, all of his churches, not God's churches, not the Lord's churches, his churches. In 2021, Warren had defied the BF&M by ordaining 3 women, leading to something of a crisis for SBC leadership. Media outlets like the Washington Post were covering Warren's rebellion with subtle notes of glee, but much of the denomination's membership was deeply upset. Would the SBC eject their celebrity son, the pastor who, according to his own website, is, quote, his website, America's most influential spiritual leader? Or would they overlook the tenets of their own statement of faith? All this conjecture was immaterial to Law, however, as he hadn't been thinking of Saddleback at all. His experience with the churches in his immediate vicinity had simply convinced him that indifference to doctrinal adherence was leading to drift and confusion, because that's what that does. Because that's what we see in all the other denominations. Megan's going to get into it later on here. She's illustrating it well with what Law rightfully is worried about. He's seeing churches around him who's supposed to share in his faith, in his denomination, his specific brand of Christianity, belonging to the same club that he belongs to, but not adhering to the same rules, doing things their own way. Something must be done. You want to correct the leaders, but who you're really worried about is the congregational members. Manuel said, like I say about politicians, you can only trust them as far as you can see them. No, I can see a politician for a long time. I trust politicians zero. I trust politicians to do what's best for them, not what's best for me, ever. Don't matter if they agree with me or not. Been around it too long. Grew up around it. That gave people purpose in life outside of God. The people got very self-righteous and obsessed with their own opinions of what God owes them. Like I said, I haven't read this Nernaeus take on things, but it doesn't sound all that far removed from the attitudes that we see from Rick Warren. He felt a bright line of clarity was in order. Thus, a month after his initial letter to the executive committee, he determined to attend the SBC's national meeting and propose a constitutional amendment. It would require SBC churches to conform to the BFNN on the question of women in the pastorate, just as they were required to do on issues of sexuality. Delegates, known as messengers, to the annual convention would have the opportunity to consider the question solely on biblical merit, free from any wrangling over famous personalities or their media-boosted power plays. But then, less than 2 weeks before the convention, put your thinking face on, Warren announced that he was retiring and named as his replacement a husband and wife team. Husband and wife team is just as bad. A husband and wife team still means a woman is speaking from the pulpit as a pastor, or at least with the impression that she is speaking with the authority of a pastor. Though law would not know it for some time, Warren's decision would become the main obstacle to his hope of giving the SBC the chance to make a clear-cut up or down choice. The first day of the convention started at 8 a.m. Law arrived at 7:45, stationing himself near one of the 10 microphones interspersed throughout the hall, which would soon be churning with more than 12,000 attendees. Though he had pre-submitted his amendment by email the night before, there was no guarantee he would actually be granted an opportunity to make a motion as the process is, by all accounts, harrowing. I've never been there. I'm not part of the Baptists. I'm not part of the SBC, so I don't know. And Mark says, retiring, aka I'm forming my own joint. Maybe. You never know with him. So we'll skip a little bit. Given how easy it would be to miss his chance, Law resolved to continue standing near the mic for 2.5 hours, even after Jonathan Howe, who we talked about earlier, came by and pressed him to sit down. Sounds like he's trying to tell him to shut up and color. His persistence paid off. He wasn't the first to make a motion as he'd hoped, but he did get his proposal in early, and it was quickly seconded. At that point, the committee on the order of business could have scheduled his amendment for an immediate vote. Let's all get this question settled now, here and now. Instead, they sent it to the executive committee, who would then decide whether to bring it forward at the next convention in the summer of 2023. Oh, let's kick the can down the road. At that moment, Law had to make a choice. He could have pulled the amendment out of the committee to force a vote on the floor, and, in fact, that morning, friends had nudged him to do so, but senior leaders in the SBC persuaded him to be patient and trust the executive committee to shepherd it through a formal vetting process, something that would also give him more time to drum up support before the 2023 convention. It was a decision he would later come to regret. Of course he would. Of course he would. Advice on both sides, sensible advice for both sides, but one with an agenda and the other one, which is also with an agenda, but with the mindset that he accomplishes goals, and the other agenda would be obfuscate. delay, cover up. Sounds like he wanted to spend more time on a yacht or something. Oh, I'm sure. Maybe at Epstein's Island. Matt said the 2002 Purpose Driven Light book is a 40-day study on 5 solid principles. I'm not familiar with the Purpose Driven Church, which was 1995. Nernath, sounds like this is table flipping time to me. Yeah. That didn't mean the issue of women in the pastorate was tabled for 2022. However, at the 2021 convention, a pastor from Louisiana had submitted a motion calling for Saddleback to be disfellowshipped over its ordination of the 3 women. Remember, that was night after Rick Warren had ordained 3 women and appointed them in the church. As with Law's motion, the Credentials Committee had decided not to act immediately, but rather take a year to consider the matter. They were now due to deliver a decision. Instead, the committee chairwoman announced they were recommending the creation of a new committee that would spend another year studying the definition of the word pastor. After this proposal was met with howls of outrage, one of the 6 seminary presidents, himself the former chair of an SBC committee, stepped up to a mic to propose another option. He felt that perhaps the problem was not with the word pastor, but cooperation, and suggested the new committee could instead spend a year studying what it meant to cooperate with the statement of faith. The messengers did not think that word required a year of study either, however, and overwhelmingly rejected this proposal as well. Then it was time for lunch. When the meeting reconvened, then President Ed Litton was announcing standard business from the platform when he was summoned to a hushed exchange with the Credentials Committee chairwoman. Upon returning to the podium, he announced there would be a departure from the agenda to hear from a surprise guest. We're going to take a moment to extend a courtesy to a pastor here from Southern California, he declared to the darkened hall. Rick Warren. We wanted to hear his heart for this convention. As the New York Times has highlighted, Saddleback has never, quote, used the word Southern or used the word Baptist in its name or foregrounded any connection to the denomination. Indeed, at a 2005 Pew Forum on religion and public life, Warren conspicuously distanced his church from the denomination. When an NBC reporter asked if it was part of the SBC, he replied, no, it was in the early years when we first got started. It was a part of the Southern Baptist Convention. Basically, we cooperated with them in their missions program, but now we're doing our own missions program. Months later, Warren asked Pew to alter its online transcript, saying he misspoke. But the Baptist Standard, another publication, observed that he has always downplayed any affiliation with the SBC because of, quote, what Warren calls widespread misperceptions about Southern Baptists, end quote. Okay, because people don't have opinions about us, we don't want to make that sure we have that label. It depends on what the meaning of pastor is. Sounds Clinton-esque. Indeed, Nernath. Indeed. And sources who have been in SBC leadership for decades tell me that before 2022, they can only recall Warren attending the convention a couple of times in 35 years. Those occasions coincided with his being offered prime speaking roles. Nonetheless, Linton gave Warren a VIP welcome, permitting him to make a speech that ran over 6 minutes, more than double the 3-minute time limit imposed on everyone else's speaking from the floor. In it, Warren cited a litany of statistical proof for his church's success. Here we go. All right, this speech that he's giving is exactly what I was talking about when I first covered Rick Warren, my thoughts on Rick Warren last year. This was the speech he gave. It is absolutely inappropriate to have anything to do with faith. It has everything to do with ego. It's highlighted a huge problem with him. And this is some of the parts he said. In it, Warren cited a litany of statistical proof for his church's success. He noted that he grew Saddleback to become the largest church in its convention that he claims that they weren't a part of anymore, and that 78,000 members of our church signed our membership covenant after taking our membership class. He even contrasted the impact of his life's work with that of the SBC institution, saying, "I've had the privilege for 43 years of training 1.1 million pastors. That's, sorry friends, is more than all the seminaries put together." The 1.1 million pastors is a misleading number, by the way, guys, because that's people who have used his textbooks. Like, you took a class. That's like the to me, that's like the equivalent of taking a class, teaching one class and saying, yeah, I taught him everything he knows about pastoring. Yeah, everything that guy knows, he owes that to me. When he was done, Litton thanked him and said he believed Warren could feel the warmth, love, and appreciation of Southern Baptists. Law tells me that in the many SBC conventions he's attended over the years, he has never seen anything like the special privilege Warren was afforded. That never happens. The parliamentarian might let somebody step up on the platform to offer a word or two on a point of procedure, but to clear the microphones and say we have a guest at microphone 3 is unheard of as far as I know. He adds that as the question of Saddleback's membership was not being debated, there was no mechanism in Robert's Rules of Order, the classic parliamentary manual that governs SBC proceedings, for the platform to recognize Warren. At no point in time at that meeting was Saddleback under the threat of being disfellowshipped, nor was that motion offered. So procedurally, it was completely and utterly out of the blue, meaning nobody had mentioned Saddleback. Nobody had mentioned Rick Warren. They just said, so he wasn't up there, and clearly he felt like he just needed to talk about how great he was, but he didn't have to defend his membership or his church's membership. He's retired anyway. That he just wanted to talk, and so they let him. Smash the idols, tear down the high places. God is greater than any man. Let God arise and his enemies be scattered. That's BS. Robert's rules allow for interruptions for pressing concerns. Yes, but that's what I'm saying. Was Warren in that moment? However, this was not pressing. Yes, this was not pressing because nobody had mentioned SBC or nobody had mentioned Saddleback. Nobody had mentioned Rick Warren. Nobody had even called for disfellowshipping anybody. They just asked for clarification on a rule. Webb was shocked by the decision on the grounds. Here were SBC leaders pressuring people like Mike Law to sit down, telling him he can't stand near a microphone until the agenda gets to motions. But all of a sudden, Rick Warren is handed the mic to essentially give a grandstanding defensive speech over an issue that wasn't even being addressed by the platform. It was surreal. Additionally, Webb notes that the platform cut off other speakers mid-sentence because their time ran out or their comments were ruled out of order on technicalities. So it was one of these really strange moments where you think to yourself, why is it that Rick Warren gets this partiality, this favor, with seemingly no time limit? It was really quite discouraging. We're seeing some pharisaical behavior here. A lot of, and I get it, you need rules and you need to stick with the rules as much as possible because there's a bit of discipline and there's a lot of people at play. But if emotion concerning the church is important, if that's the case, then you need to address it. You need to take the time to address something. Oh yeah, Matt, that speech. Hold on. Let me see if I can pull it up since we're talking about it. Why am I all of a sudden? Oh, there we go. Let's see. Oh, and they're in Anaheim. All right, let's see if I can, let me see if I can share this. Oh, crap. Hang on. Excuse me. Okay, share audio. Okay, good. All right, y'all let me know if y'all can't hear it. Call me a boomer.
First, everybody, welcome to Orange County Southern Baptist. Of 149 Southern Baptist churches here, 90 of them started by Saddleback Church. Wow.
Like he's paused
it's
for applause.
For a guy who's about to be hung to let him say his dying words. I have no intention of defending myself. I have taught my kids and grandkids for years. I am most like Christ when I refuse to defend myself. Amen. The Bible says Jesus spoke not a word unto them when Pilate accused him of all kinds of things. So I have no intention.
He's just like
I have
Jesus,
most
guys.
of you on my mailing list anyway, and I can write you and tell you what I believe about the gift of pastoring as opposite from the office of pastoring. But I'm not here to talk about that. Lunchtime, I wrote you a love letter, and I'd like for my possibly, likely last convention to read it to you. Kay and I could have not built Saddleback Church to its size and influence in any other denomination.
I mean, nobody else would have put up with him.
I love Southern Baptist. I am a fourth-generation Southern Baptist pastor. My great-grandfather was led to Christ by Charles Spurgeon and sent to America as a church planter. Saddleback was sponsored by the North American Mission Board. I served on the staff of the California State Convention and the Texas State Convention as a teenager. Billy Graham picked me up when I was 18, and for the next 52 years mentored me because I started at 16 years old, hired by the California Convention to preach youth revivals, and I had preached over 120 harvest crusades before I was 20.
Oh, look at me.
Billy took this long-haired, skinny Californian and mentored me for the next 52 years. Here's my love letter to you, because I really am grateful. If this is my last convention, because of Southern Baptist polity, I was allowed to serve one church for life. That's not possible in those denominations. And get
possible
through,
non-denoms
to become the largest church in this convention. Because Southern Baptist gave me a passion for evangelism and mission. We baptized 56,631 new believers. And as a Southern Baptist Church, sent 26,869 members overseas to 197 nations. Because Southern Baptist taught me the value of a membership covenant. 78,157 members of our church signed our membership covenant after taking a 4-hour membership class. Because Southern Baptist taught me to emphasize the priority of Bible study. We now have 9,173 home Bible studies in homes in 162 Southern California cities. Because Southern Baptist taught me the value of church planting. That I already mentioned. We planted 90 in Orange County alone and literally thousands around the world. Because Southern Baptist taught me to honor and love the local church, I've had the privilege for 43 years of training 1.1 million pastors.
Pause for effect.
Sorry, friends, that's more than all the seminaries put together. I owe you all so much. So I sincerely say, thank you, Southern Baptist, for shaping my life. And including
No.
You're never going to find another Baptist who agrees with you completely on everything. There are Baptist brothers here today who don't believe Jesus died for the whole world. But we imagine somehow get along with them.
He's talking about Calvinists.
So as Western culture grows more dark, more evil, more secular, we have to decide, are we going to treat each other as allies or adversaries? Second, since this is the year 2022, that means we are 2022 years from the birth of Christ. Now we know Christ started his ministry at 30 years of age. Luke tells us that, had a 3.5-year ministry. Christ died in AD 33. He was resurrected in AD 33. He gave the Great Commission in AD 33. He sent the Holy Spirit and started the church in AD 33. That means 2033, just 11 years from today, is the 2000th anniversary of the Great Commission. I hope one of you, because I won't be here next year, will make a resolution that Baptists take the next 10 years to finish the task of the Great Commission in our generation before
prophesying
the
end times
of the
here?
church. Are we going to keep bickering over secondary issues? Or are we going to keep the main thing the main thing? We need
Bickering
to
over
finish the
secondary
task,
issues.
and
What he's
that
being
will make
criticized
God
for,
smile.
because
Thank you,
he's being
everybody. I love
criticized
you.
for it. Because he's being criticized for it. It's a secondary issue. Oh, it's not that big of a deal. It's a big enough of a deal. Took him 3 minutes to mention Jesus in passing, in relation to what other people think, and then talk about not things that really so much deal with the spiritual teachings of Christ, but just noting he gave the Great Commission when he gave the Great Commission. Said, hey, he's very good at sidestepping things. He's very good at leaving himself enough wiggle room to say that he was misrepresented, that people interpreted what he said differently. You know who else does this a lot? Andy Stanley. It's enough that a person who is on the right path may continue to be on the right path and not even notice that he just gave somebody room to misbehave. But to somebody else who might be struggling, might be wondering, floundering a little bit in their faith a little bit, he could send them down a very different path. All right, let me get back up here. Now, you can take from that speech what you want. No, we're not talking about Mark Driscoll. We're talking about Rick Warren. There's a lot of people who fall in the categories, or into that category. All right. Still, after Warren's speech, the credentials chairwoman announced that the committee had heard the messengers and were withdrawing their recommendation to study any words for a year. But since they'd already confirmed that Saddleback would not be disfellowshipped then, they still had another year to consider the matter before they had to make a report to the denomination again. Still, the seed of questioning definitions was planted, and the intramural debate that followed the convention, in which the meaning of particular words and phrases were minutely dissected and to determine if the authors could have intended something other than their obvious meaning, would sound familiar to any constitutional attorney. Love to get as Nick would be fond to hear, probably. Those who wanted to open pulpits to females argued that pastor might have referred only to senior pastor or teaching pastor. Those who didn't argue the plain text originalist position. Luckily, I love Megan's writing here. Luckily, unlike James Madison or Thomas Jefferson, the authors responsible for Article 6 of the Southern Baptist Statement of Faith were still alive and able to tell their denomination exactly what they meant. Doctors Albert Mohler, Chuck Kelly, and Richard Land released a statement clarifying that when they wrote pastor 22 years earlier to address the handful of SBC women who had become to claim that title, they meant simply pastor, any pastor. Any pastor, flat out, shall not be infringed. This convention's membership is defined by the limiting role of pastors to men. Mohler, who's a big figure in the Baptist movement, serves as president of Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, tells me. You'll notice that the BF&M does not put senior or any other modifier in front of the word, so it's not the convention that is unclear in this case. In fact, he says, and his co-authors chose it because of all the words Baptists use related to the teaching office, pastor was the most difficult to misunderstand. Yep. And yet suddenly, 2 decades later, look, we're at a time period where no words mean what they ever meant before. Nobody ever understood what words meant until the current year. And yet suddenly, 2 decades later, a lot of people were misunderstanding it, or at least pretending to. That's the big one. They were pretending to. As for why so many Southern Baptists were experiencing this newfound confusion, Mohler believes it has less to do with definitions and more to do with cultural pressures, which he notes have been pushing in an egalitarian direction for decades. Like law, he sees ordaining women as the first step down the road of liberalism that also leads to affirming LGBTQ identities and behaviors, a trajectory many mainline denominations have taken. If you look at the churches that have confusion, I'm sorry, if you look at the churches that have here, let me stop. If you are still here, Emmanuel, because I know you've been quiet, but you should probably because you're listening, or I bored you to death. He is the law. He is the law. Hold on. Fun fact: say wrote Seth Elameth to a woman pastor, and it opens up a wormhole to an alternate dimension and banishes them there. Yeah. If only. It's not quite elvish. anyway, Emmanuel, if you are listening and we were talking about what the problem is, here's where Megan's going to start talking about slippery slope with the bridge here. If you look at the churches that have confused the question of men and women in the church and home, they tend to be overwhelmingly the same denominations that have followed the route of compromise on the larger sexuality and gender identity questions, Mohler argues. Frankly, this is all part of a package in terms of the theological confusion of the day. And if the SBC is faced with a church that directly and aggressively challenges our position on women pastors and the SBC does not take action, then that weakens our ability to take actions on these other matters. Yeah. And here's the thing, it's quiet affirmation. We didn't say, but because you didn't say no, they viewed it as okay. You had the opportunity to say no, and you didn't because you didn't want to hurt feelings, or you didn't want to cause drama, or you didn't want to lose members and money, whatever the problem is. You obfuscated. And now, here's where you got. In his podcast interview with Russell Moore's wife, Beth Moore, is one of the biggest problems that we as traditionalists have. Because she is egalitarian to her core. And she says some of the most asinine, irreverent things about church and about Jesus and about other people. Run away. In his podcast interview with Russell Moore, Warren insisted that concerns of leftward drift in the SBC generally, and Saddleback specifically, are unfounded. This is not a battle between liberals and conservatives, he said. All the liberals left a long time ago. Really? Hope your family's doing well, Emmanuel. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Jesus had it right. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yet there is significant evidence that his church is already sliding towards liberalism when it comes to homosexuality and gender identity. In early 2020, Saddleback pastor Chris Clark and his wife Elisa co-founded a Saddleback chapter of Embracing the Journey, a ministry for parents of LGBTQ children with longtime Saddleback members Doug and Shauna Habel. By the end of 21, an ETJ newsletter revealed that Saddleback was hosting 4 ongoing ETJ support groups and 1 small group. While ETJ does not specify whether it affirms LGBTQ lifestyles and identities, which is a problem in and of itself, its founder, Greg McDonald, sits on the board of Renovos, another faith-based nonprofit that does assert that homosexuality and transgenderism are compatible with Christianity. The 2 organizations are closely linked. Yeah. She had one Twitter thing where she was basically, in effect, saying that she was all hot and bothered over over Jesus's grapes or something like that. It was something very weird, and it's just it's tweets like that it's just stop. I would not be surprised. He sits on a throne of lies. Founder Greg, I already did that. Billing itself as a religious nonprofit that exists to, quote, reclaim faith for LGBTQ plus Christians, Renovus says that its vision is a world where no one has to choose between their faith and sexual orientation or gender identity. Okay, yeah. When I hear him, Mr. Scott says, when I hear Saddleback, my mind wants to add Brokeback. While McDonald does not offer his views on homosexuality or transgenderism in his ETJ bio, in his Renovus bio, he shares, it simply breaks my heart when people are told they can't be a Christian and LGBTQ. You can struggle. This is the part. And this is they're either being intellectually dishonest or flat out lying or stupid, in my opinion. To say that, because you can struggle with your sin. You can struggle with desires that are sinful, and a desire that is sinful on many levels, I think, unless it's like against children or something super egregious. They're all about on the same level. We shouldn't try to order it out. Sin is sin, because it can all equally be wiped out by God's grace. You can struggle with sinful desires and even breaks where you give into your sin and repent. That's part of you being a Christian and struggling with maybe homosexuality or a litany of other things. But when you go, no, I'm just this way, God's got to deal with it. That's not part of, you cannot be that and be a Christian. Scott, that joke's been around for a while. Manuel said, nope, not on my watch. You ain't saying that LGBT is way away from the truth. make calling people heretic great again. You can struggle with sin, but to admittedly practice it and keep acting up on it, absolutely not. Sin is equally damning, but some have greater earthly consequences. I try to treat it all the same, except for against me. Mr. Scott said, I really didn't know about the SBC until this interview showed up on my Facebook feed, and then Raslin started popping up on my feed. If you said SBC a month ago, I would have thought small block Chevy. It's the better SBC. And not to say SBC churches on themselves are a problem. Again, we saw how many there are. There's a lot of good churches out there, and probably maybe even the majority of these churches are righteous at heart and just trying to do their best. They're humanly best. But then there's the big churches, and then there's the big egos, and the big personalities and the big money. But yeah, SBC's huge though. I thought it was a whole denomination. Southern Baptist, I thought it was his entire denomination when I was younger. And being non-denominational, I don't really pay attention as much to it. More so now that I've got this channel, I'm trying to inform myself. And it's great when I get other insights from people who are parts of these groups, and let me know what it is. And many ask why I'm fully committed to the Imperium and the way to deal with heretics. Bring on in the Black Templars. The wolves are out there, Emmanuel. The wolves are out there, everybody. They're out there, and you've got to be willing to call them out when they are blatantly identifying themselves. Along with recommending ETJ, Renovus endorses groups like the Reformation Project, gaychurch.org, and Q Christian Fellowship. All are dedicated, in the words of the Reformation Project, to advancing LGBT inclusion in the church, and all claim that church teaching that condemns same-sex relationships and transgender people cause serious harm in the lives of LGBTQ Christians. Wrong. We're trying to improve your soul. What's Templars? One more commonality. All three activist groups endorse ETJ, and the connections continue. How far in are we? An hour? Yeah. We're rolling through this pretty well. On its events page, Renovus lists an upcoming ETJ conference in Atlanta. The lineup of I don't care about this. Oh, wait, hold on. The lineup of speakers includes Saddleback Pastor Chris Clark, Renovus board member Debbie Causey, as well as a number of authors like Matthew Vines, David Gushi, and Justin Lee, who are well known for rejecting biblical orthodoxy on homosexuality and transgenderism in favor of full LGBTQ inclusion in the church. What's going on, Carl? These Virginia allergies are killing me today, Carl. But even if ETJ were not so deeply intertwined with openly affirming organizations and influencers, its recommendations and activities should still call Saddleback's discernment in deciding to partner with the organization into serious question. Nowhere in its online materials does ETJ characterize LGBTQ identities or behaviors as sinful. Indeed, the vast majority of its recommended resources are explicitly affirming. Again, from Gushi, Vines, and Lee, as well as Pavlitz, McLaren, Colby Martin, and more. To return again to those who launched ETJ at Saddleback, a close examination of Shauna Habel and Chris Clark's activism suggests that fears about the connection between churches who shift stances on ordaining women and those who shift on LGBTQ issues are well-founded. In a Facebook fundraising video for the documentary 1946, which argues that the traditional Christian condemnation of homosexuality traces back to a modern translation error, Habel, who sometimes goes by Habel Morgan, of course she does, explains how she came to share this belief. Describing her attendance at a 2016 Reformation Project conference with her daughter, Habel says, "I saw gay Christians worshiping God. I saw the Holy Spirit, and I knew that God was in that place." He's everywhere, lady. He's in that place. That doesn't mean he's okay with what you're doing. He says, "Same here, Carl. I know you know what I'm feeling, right?" Emmanuel says, "The demon of LGBTQ is quite strong. Hold in a lot is quite strong. The demon is quite a stronghold in a lot of big churches, but I can see why. Eventually, there's going to be a crack in people. Not only, but hey, what normally happens is these places shrink, or it just becomes completely divorced from faith, that there's really very little actual faith there. You're in faith with yourself." Describing her attendance. Oh, wait. Habel has been clear on Twitter that part of her mission is persuading churches to abandon biblical orthodoxy with respect to sexuality and gender. In response to trans-identifying actress Ellen Page's criticism of non-affirming churches, she posted, Churches like Hillsong that mandate queer celibacy should try a year of solitary themselves. God's endgame is love. A year solitary? I've done that. I've done that. I was in Iraq for a year. All right. I spent a very, very awkward relationship areas when I was in my late teens and early 20s. A year. Get out of here. Get out of here. She thinks like it's so difficult, right? It's so difficult to keep it in your pants. Uh-oh, Flawed, did you steal from commissary? In basic, I actually did. Never got caught. But the thing is, you got to steal really small stuff, mostly condiments. For me, it was peanut butter. Love peanut butter. But look, men in general, but specifically dads, love peanut butter. Reported. Shutdown's coming. Statute of limitations, buddy. I could already be retired from the army. Yeah. God's endgame is love. No. Stop. Well, your definition of love and God's definition of love are very different because we can already tell. When a journalist posted a story about the gay marriage of Department of DOT head Pete Buttigieg, Habel replied that she works with conservative parents to help them become affirming. And she replied to author Beth Moore's Beth Moore, talked about early, explanation for why she removed a passage condemning homosexuality from an older book. I believe the sin the Bible spoke about in regards to homoerotic behavior was the abusive rape or lust of others and not love. Yeah, you believe that. You made that up. I have some of that, Mr. Scott. I have some of that. And I'll mix it with a yoo-hoo. This is from a buddy of mine who put me onto this. Mix that stuff with a yoo-hoo. Oh, man. It is. It's so good. So good. What is it? Screwball whiskey, I think, is peanut butter whiskey. It's not a good sipping whiskey, guys. That's not what it's there for. It's flavored whiskey. It's there for cocktails and all that other stuff. It's not. This is cheap stuff. But it's good. Habel is also at work on her own affirming materials, assisting activist Kathy Baldock on a forthcoming book called How the Bible Became Anti-Gay, Forging a Sacred Weapon. Chris Clark has little online presence either as Saddleback pastor or as an activist with ETJ, but he, Habel, and McDonald were all speakers at the Reformation Project's 2020 conference, Reconcile and Reform. Again, the Reformation Project was founded by gay activist Matthew Vines to equip and empower Christians to advocate for LGBTQ inclusion in their faith communities. Stop focusing on who you want to have sex with. Manual. Someone needs to do a voiceover for that. It's worth emphasizing that according to ETJ's newsletter, the Clarks and Habels introduced ETJ to Saddleback 2.5 years before Warren retired in September of 22. It's also clear the church is well aware of its activities as the ministry is listed on Saddleback's website under the care and support events. Imagine not vetting this thing out thoroughly. Right? Imagine not vetting this out thoroughly. Though Clark's LinkedIn page no longer appears to be available, it previously revealed that he has been affiliated with Saddleback in some professional capacity since '89. It also showed that he has been a Saddleback care pastor at the Lake Forest campus for 4.5 years. His ETJ bio provides the further detail that he leads Saddleback's counseling training, a role that would be presumably include teaching lay counselors how to respond to congregants dealing with homosexuality or transgenderism. Further, both the Reformation Project and ETJ cite Clark as a Saddleback pastor. In his speaker bio, suggesting the church endorses his activities in this arena. Yes. or it's come up. Because we've had, especially when we went over Leviticus, when I did the stream on Leviticus, when we hit there was a lot of talk about this, but I haven't really focused on it, because I don't like. I feel like really digging into it gives it more credit, gives the theory more credit than it deserves. I'd rather just dismiss it out of hand. It's not true. It's not compatible. It's not right. It's not correct. And yeah, the definition, there's love from a romantic or erotic standpoint, but this is not what we're talking about. Okay. And this is why the weird stuff that Beth Moore and other people do with, oh my gosh, I'm so hot for Jesus, is so dumb, because they've sexualized it. He's our father. Daddy issues McGee. Again, what it all comes down to is we have desires, and some of our desires are incompatible with Christianity, incompatible with the commandments God has given us. So what do? The same thing the Israelites did. Ignore them, or obfuscate, or split hairs, or misunderstand, or twist, or take out of context. And whatever you need to do to justify it, so that you don't have to pretend it's sinful anymore, or you don't have to, so that you can pretend it's not sinful anymore. Whatever you have to do for that, that's what you do, because that'll help you sleep better at night or something, when you should be praying. I'm not reading that, Emmanuel. Good night. Yes, that is wrong. Finally, the couple Warren selected to lead Saddleback don't seem entirely the lead Saddleback the entirety. Remember the husband and wife team? Don't seem entirely clear on the Bible's stance on homosexuality either. When asked either gay married couples should carry on with their sinful relationship after coming to Christ, Andy and Stacy Wood answered, I don't know. That's really hard. They went on to say, there's no black and white answer. Yes, there is. They'd have to ask the couple how they feel the Holy Spirit is leading them. Oh. God! How to stop asking if a human if it's okay. Stop asking a human to define God's commandments. God gave the commandments to Moses. He didn't give them to whatever person Andy and Stacy Wood are talking to. It's okay, Emmanuel. I reached out to Saddleback about their decision to partner with I can't stand this acronym because it's so hard to say for me. ETJ, and about the involvement of one of their pastors and two of their ministry leaders within the Reformation Project, and did not receive a reply. These people are probably terrified of Megan. Saddleback could simply agree to part amicably with the SBC, given that it no longer agrees with the denomination's doctrine. It would not lose any of its own properties or staff or membership by doing so. As one pastor joked, most of the church's members probably just found out they were SBC due to all the One pastor joked, most of the church's members probably just found out they were Southern Baptist due to all the controversy and media coverage. Like, what? Wait, this needs to be explained to my Catholic behind. This is a very Protestant outlook. Okay. I'm following you on that joke. Again, there are pros and cons. It's a small church, faithful to Christ as best they can. We're not going to get it right all the time. We're going to screw up. And sometimes we're going to screw up royally. There are going to be seasons when we're doing a fantastic job, and there's going to be seasons where we're screwing up left and right. The family is there. The congregation is there. The people who are there, it's on us to guide each other, to fall down, pick ourselves up, and keep rolling. We don't just abandon each other when the going gets tough. So, but yeah, we don't have the big who was that Natalie, what's her name, in Colorado that asked all the girls and young women to mail them their purity rings and have them melted into it. I feel like I heard of that a long time ago, but man, I hadn't remembered it. I didn't. Pros and cons, MR. We're free-range chickens. Living life in the fast lane, MR. But Grant Castleberry, a Raleigh pastor who supports Law's amendment, points out that this is not the pattern we historically see from those who want to remove in a liberal direction. If you study how denominations went liberal throughout the 20th century, note the 20th century, not any of the other ones, the 20th century. 2,000 years, right? We're talking about Rick Warren, 2,000 years, 1,900 years of the Christian church. 5 minutes ago, this started happening. I wonder why. If you study how denominations went liberal throughout the 20th century, they never left the denominations because there are institutions at stake. Let me read this again so that I can make sure I get this better. Bok. If you study how denominations went liberal throughout the 20th century, they never left the denominations because there are institutions at stake. There's seminaries at stake, colleges at stake, there's buildings at stake. And so the strategy that liberals employed throughout was to never leave. It was to take control, which is why we're not supposed to leave. We need to take control. As the summer of 22 faded into fall, Mike Law began to make the case for his constitutional amendment to this wider SBC. In August, he drafted a public letter and began soliciting signatures from the SBC pastors to demonstrate to the executive committee that an up and down vote was necessary to bring clarity to the current confusion. The letter also stressed that allowing the situation to continue encouraged churches to distrust the scriptures that had led the convention to affirm Article 6 in the first place. Devaluing our doctrine will not lead to faithfulness or fruitfulness, Law wrote. Rather, if we learn anything from the history of liberal mainline denominations, embracing empty doctrines will soon empty our convention too, which is true. Anglican churches, ELCA churches, UMC churches, Churches of Christ, United Churches of Christ, or whatever the liberal one is, Universalist churches, they're all just, they're ghost towns compared to what they were, because that's what happens. The liberals get in, they change everything. Hey, look, everybody can be here. But then what does an honest person do? They come in, they read the scripture, and they see the thing, and we're like, these aren't the same. And they leave. And the only people that are left are the people who are fooling themselves. And so the people who leave either leave the faith entirely because they've lost faith that the word of God is true, because the church, the very church that worships him, can't figure it out, or they move to a church that's more traditional. Orthodoxy is gaining in popularity for this reason, and others. But there you go. Traditional Catholicism is gaining popularity in some circles because of this. Their big problem is the Pope. It's a big stumbling block for people. Many pastors seem to agree, and his petition rapidly gained more than 2,000 signatures. But dozens of pastors replied that they could not sign because their churches, the majority of which had been Southern Baptist since their founding, had already broken with the SBC over perceived leftward drift. A decade ago, I was in ministry in the United Methodist Church, wrote one from Melbourne, Florida. The writing was on the wall, and the Lord graciously called us out of that. The same writing is on the wall now for the SBC. The fact that the committee wanted to take a year to figure out what a pastor is beyond laughable. A pastor from Burton, Kansas, shared that his congregation had voted to leave when the convention failed to address women in the pastorate in 22 when given a clear opportunity. Several explained that even more than drift, a lack of responsiveness from national leadership led to their decision to depart. I personally was in the SBC for 54 years, wrote one pastor from Millington, Tennessee. We tried for months to get clarifications on many issues. We wrote letters, called, but no answer. Another told Law, my church would join you in a second if I thought the executive committee would listen to you. Law pushed forward, hoping the committee would prove such pessimism wrong, and for a while, it looked like they might. In October, the trustees for Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, SBTS, the largest and most influential of the 6 SBC schools, made it clear they wanted to see the pastoral requirement of biblically qualified men remain. Almost immediately after, new SBC President Bart Barber and Executive Committee Chairman Jared Wellman issued a joint statement about the amendment saying, as far as it lies within our authority to do so, first off, let me back up a second. Bart Barber, from what I've read from his responses to things, he answers questions without answering. Oddly enough, who we talked about tonight, we reference in here, Rick Warren, leave yourself enough wiggle room. Andy Stanley, leave yourself enough wiggle room. Even the Pope does this when they're talking about these issues. Don't make Bart Barber, right? Almost immediately after, new SBC President Bart Barber and Executive Committee Chairman Jared Wellman issued a joint statement about the amendment saying, as far as it lies within our authority to do so, we are committed to letting these questions come before the messengers at our 2023 annual meeting in a few months from today. We plan to protect the messengers' rights to discuss and decide these questions. Yeah, like you have before. Taking this as a good sign, Law began reaching out individually to members of the executive committee, offering to respond to any questions or concerns they might have. In November, he met with Jonathan Howe and other executive committee staff over Zoom, who told them that they would decide at their February meeting, which has happened 2 months ago, whether to allow his amendment a floor vote. But before February arrived, Law began to hear from various national leaders, suggesting perhaps his amendment itself could be amended. Perhaps it could just address senior pastors instead of pastors, despite the fact that Article 6's authors made it explicitly clear that was not their intent. I could just tell they were kind of casting about for a different option. No, I was calling myself a free-range chicken. Non-denoms and independent churches. We're the freest of free-range chickens. I could just tell they were kind of casting about for a different option, Law tells me. And I was clear I didn't want that, because the whole point was to bring clarity and long-term stability to the convention. After his refusal to cede to a lesser option, the reception Law received from the committee seemed to turn icy. Their staff informed him he would not be able to submit the list of thousands of SBC pastors who had signed his open letter supporting the amendment. They would also not consider the partial list of SBC churches with female pastors he had created as evidence of the need to act. Then came the biggest blow of all. On February 7th, 2 weeks before the executive committee meeting, where they were supposed to decide whether to bring this amendment up for a vote, Wellman told Law they were pushing the decision off. The committee would wait until their final meeting in June, right before the convention. The news did not bode well, and Law could not understand what had caused the change of heart. Crushed, he emailed the subcommittee chairman asking if he could come to Nashville for their February 21st meeting and give a 20-minute PowerPoint presentation on why the amendment was needed. That's not a lot. That's not a lot of time. The chairman said he could have 5 with no PowerPoint, but he could have a brief Q&A. Well, I understand getting rid of PowerPoint. PowerPoint is murder on my attention span and my life. PowerPoint is the single worst thing to the quality of life that Microsoft ever did to people. Or Bill Gates, maybe. Because he would have no access to media, and his in-person talk would be so short, Law, the father of 4 young children who had already invested much more time in this project than he had ever anticipated, put together a YouTube video of his presentation. He then emailed the link to the executive committee members early on the morning of February 16th, explaining in his first 2 sentences what it was and inviting them to watch it on the chance they had time or interest. To keep the mood light, he joked, "If you watch it at double speed, it'll go even faster." We've heard this before. Heard this before on the Nick show, right? I made a PowerPoint on shark attacks stats where I did a Quint impression the whole time. Got an A. That's the only reason you got an A. It's because you did the Quint impression. But at some point, I was at 11:48, the subcommittee chairman emailed back simply, "Thanks, Mike. See you next week." But at some point over the course of the day, the chairman evidently decided that Law, who had never been told he shouldn't or couldn't communicate with committee members, had offended by emailing the video. At 5:47 p.m., the chairman replied again, this time with a terse note. "You have essentially worked around what is common procedure for having motion makers share with the executive committee. Because of this, the chairman said he would no longer be allowed Q&A time, only the 5 minutes to present." Then, on February 21st, the same day Law gave his brief and uneventful presentation, the Credentials Committee made a move so unexpected. Not only did the New York Times, People magazine, and NBC, just to name a few, pick up the news, so did the British outlet The Guardian. The Guardian picks up everything. Guardian does more news than any of those other guys. The executive committee announced it was disfellowshipping Saddleback. What? Southern Baptists on both sides of the debate immediately expressed confusion over the timing. SBC leadership had drugged their feet on the question of Warren's church for nearly 2 years. Why would they abruptly oust Saddleback to close the convention? Oust Saddleback so close to the convention? Why not just let the issue lie until June when they could make a report to the messengers? Even more sensible, why not put Law's amendment up for a vote and let the convention decide the principle that should apply, not just to Saddleback, but to the hundreds of other churches that were flouting the statement of faith? Wonder why. If I have to keep my PowerPoints as sparse as possible and have my notes memorized, it keeps people actually engaged because they have to take notes. Yeah. The PowerPoint's really only supposed to give you like the bullet points, right? It's basically showing your topics to the group in written form where they can continue to look up at it. Almost like your notes for your speech up there for everybody to see with some clip art, some word art. A tweet from executive committee member Mike Kiabone, I hope I pronounced that right. I actually don't care. Immediately following the announcement seemed to give the game away. Saddleback has now has the option to appeal, which appears likely, Keybone said. That appeal would happen on the floor of the annual meeting in New Orleans and be decided by the messengers. This was the heart of the room, to let the messengers of the SBC decide. Keybone did not express how it would appear likely that Saddleback would do anything, given that the decision had just been announced that day and Warren had not yet offered any public comment about how his church would respond. But it was clear that the statement Barber and Wellman had made about the Law's amendment, letting the messengers decide, was about to go through a spin cycle. Backdoor president. 2 days after Keybone's post, Barber echoed the sentiment in a long tweet thread that made it clear the decision to disfellowship Saddleback was not one of principle made because the executive committee believed the church had violated biblical doctrine, but one of strategy. Probably how he worded it meant he didn't answer anything clearly. This is actually the most direct mechanism for the messengers to be able to vote on this question. No, it's not, Barber. The most direct mechanism would have been to let everybody vote on it last year. That's the easiest way. Or do it this year. Doing all this other stuff is procedural. It's all strategic. You can see that. It's such a stupid, disingenuous, lying, political piece of crap answer. Stop it. Barber wrote, adding, to suggest that the committee has usurped the messengers in taking this action misconstrues the spirit of the EC members in making the decisions. No, it doesn't. He pointed out that if the committee had not decided to oust Saddleback, another messenger could have made a motion to disfellowship it again, restarting the process. Or you could have just voted on the issue that law would prevent it. Barber made no mention of the fact that there was also an amendment on the table that could put an end to the process in a much clearer and more convictional way. Exactly. He didn't make that because he's not going to talk about it. The executive committee kicked Saddleback out of the clubs, in other words, to force a vote on Saddleback. And that vote would be how the messengers would make their voices heard on the issue. The swap was evidenced by Barber's closing remark in the thread. I promised earlier in the year that I would do all I could to let the messengers express their will on this question. He said, I remain committed to that. So Barber's pledge to let the messengers decide, which has been made in the context of Law's amendment, was being retrofitted to Warren's appeal. Law and his being written out of the script, because of course it is. That's his questioning, his asking why we're not following our own principles is problematic. Sam Webb, however, was not inclined to erase the existence of the amendment. Though he had to ask Barber 3 times what his comments meant for Law, he did finally get an answer during a testy exchange, which most concerning Barber are. Barber is very testy. Webb posted a link to a news story about the joint statement saying, the article below about the amendment says that you are committed to letting these questions come before the messenger. Barber replied that Webb, referring to his initial promise in the context in which it had been offered, was the equivalent of demanding Law get, quote unquote, special treatment in a VIP pass. It's not about Law, the pastor. It's about Law in the scripture. Stop trying to qualify this as one man's crusade. This is something that a lot of people are concerned on. Even if you agree with Law or not, you're still concerned about it because you have an opinion on it. So it needs to be settled. So stop making it about Law. Law's just Law's just the thorn in your side because he keeps reminding you that it's a problem. He keeps reminding you that it needs to be addressed. He keeps reminding you that you're being dishonest about it. He keeps reminding you that you're a coward. And that's the bottom line. Barber's a coward. Doesn't want to deal with this. Or perhaps he affirms. Perhaps he doesn't want to answer the answer because he's complicit in it. Actively complicit in it. Which was a lot of the criticism for him running for the chairman's seat. Because there were a lot of other people. Megan Basham, I think, was another one who was up for that position, and this whole thing would have been handled a whole different way. But Barber's response was positively forthright compared to Wellman's, who denied in an email to Law that the joint statement had ever been referring to his amendment, despite the fact that the article about it from the SBC's own house organ, The Baptist Press, had been titled Barber Wellman Issue Statement on Proposed Constitutional Amendment. Some rank-and-file onlookers seem to have picked up on the there was a whole argument between Megan and Barber after this article came out about whether the Baptist Press has anything to do with answers at all to the executive committee or the SBC or anything, even though it's their own publishing. Some rank-and-file onlookers seem to have picked up on the state of play and realized that whether women can be pastors in the SBC is likely going to be decided by a popularity contest over Rick Warren. Most Southern Baptists, though, busy with their churches and communities, likely have no idea. Sounds a lot like the Mr. Beast issue. That. Inside sources tell me many will assume the question of women pastors has been addressed and will not come to the convention to vote, which is good that Megan's doing this article to remind everybody it's not over. The executive committee didn't have to schedule a vote on Saddleback. They wanted to boot Rick Warren in a mid-year meeting that nobody knew was coming, one SBC insider who has worked closely with the committee tells me. That way, the conservatives see it and think, that's great. The issue's been handled. We won't need to go to the convention. Meanwhile, the outrage by the liberals has been maximized. And that's who's going to show up angry. It'll be a question of, do you want to keep Rick Warren? Whatever happens with that vote will set a backdoor precedent. Was that a pun? Is the backdoor precedent a pun based on the whole crux of this? Never mind. Already, the celebrity canvassing on Warren's behalf had begun. New York Times columnist and Presbyterian and colossal jackass David French promoted Warren's argument that the SBC statement of faith, with which Warren agreed with until 2020, represents fundamentalism. They used the F word, guys. They've used the F word. How dare you be fundamental? How dare you be fundamental? It's never over to fight messed up doctrine. And good, let the liberals get angry. Yeah, but they're going to be more motivated is what it is, what they say. It's kind of like a midterm election or something like that. They're going to be more motivated to come out, to show up and express their outrage. Popular historian and author Scott McKnight, an Anglican, meaning none of these guys are Baptists, promoted another petition that was just launched, tweeting, "Please sign this letter with me to support women in ministry in the SBC." Never mind the fact that no one in the SBC has been trying to stop women from serving in ministry, only from acting as pastors. It's noteworthy that the group had launched a petition, Baptist Women in Ministry. It was started by women who left the SBC in the 1980s and 90s over its refusal to ordain women. One of the founders, Molly Marshall, now serves as president of a seminary for the United Church of Christ, the first mainline denomination in the U.S. to endorse gay marriage. And today, the group features female Baptist ministers who advocate reproductive justice, i.e., abortion access, and describe the joy they experience from fully including LGBT brothers and sisters. They say to a congregation of 20. It might have taken the feminist dissidents 30 plus years, but they may at last be on the brink of getting their way in the SBC. And female pastors may only be their first win. Nearly everyone who has, at one time or another, watched the Jimmy Stewart classic, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. It is a classic. It's the quintessential American feel-good story of the little guy who overcomes the machinery of power, wealth, and fame, armed with nothing more than good intentions and a devotion to a cause. If you've ever read, guys, Atlas Shrugged or Fountainhead or whatever, Atlas Shrugged is the one I'm talking about most. Reardon's stand against Congress. This is the Saturday night or Saturday morning feel good family version of that, with a because it ends differently. You could call it the Disney one, but it's actually wholesome, so it's old school Disney. But that's just a movie. Law tells me he doesn't hold out much hope now that his amendment will be brought before the messengers. I tried to follow the process, he says. It turns out the process stinks. Come June, there will be a vote on Saddleback. The question is, will there be a vote on Scripture? Nicely done. Nicely done, Megan. I thought this was a great. This shed more light on the SBC issue and what was going on behind Rick Warren's ego trip than anything anybody could tell me. Because of a lot of the very devout people on Twitter that I try to network with, they're not a member of the Southern Baptist Convention. They might be Baptists, but they're not part of the SBC, which should tell you something. Should tell you something. What do free-range chickens eat, MR? Bugs. Eat the bugs, Mr. Scott. Also, they do like corn. I've fed chickens chicken before. It's never over to fight messed up doctrine. Wait, we already said that again. I don't know if you remember, but people with reproductive impairments were not allowed into tabernacle. Pretty sure gays count too. I didn't realize Rand Paul named after Ayn Rand until the other week. Oh, you didn't? Oh, yeah, dude. MR. Never raised chickens before. They're amazing for your yard. Oh, we got these things called chicken tractors that my dad has. And it's basically a mobile coop. And you move it around the yard, and the chickens, throughout the day, you feed them a little bit, right? Because they're not going to get everything they need off the ground. Feed them a little bit, give them water. It's all hanging from the roof. So they eat, they scratch, and they do whatever. And they eat bugs, and they aerate your yard. So then you let them there for a little bit, and then you move it, and then they continue the process, and you go all, and then you just move all around your yard with it. So there you go. I'm a city boy, though, although my neighbors had them. Not for long. Until they get tasty. All right, guys. Almost 2 hours. 2 hours. There you go. It's hard to put this into perspective. Like I said, I know a lot of people who I think got a lot out of purpose-driven life. Maybe it was wholesome, maybe it was not. I haven't read it. Their Nath says it's not. Again, whatever. I do know that the source of it is not a wholesome source. Has he always been like this? Don't know. Do you think Chris Tucker was like he is now all the time? Or did this just happen for some reason? You never know. Calvinists would say it's always been there. I'm not a Calvinist. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm open to that. And eventually I'm going to get Paul back on here, and we're going to talk a little bit more about Calvinism. But tonight we talked about the SBC, and you can understand this is an inside look. This is an inside look at problems that large institutions, faith institutions have. And we're looking at it at a issue where it's been discussed already with other denominations. United Methodist Church is breaking up because of this. The Episcopalians, big issues when they did it. Anglicans, they're going through it down in Australia and in other places. The Lutheran churches. This happens a lot of places. It's happening everywhere. Modernists versus traditionalists. Complementarians versus egalitarians. Scripture versus feelings. A lot of breaks. We look, a lot of breaks for a lot of broken people. And if anybody thinks the Catholics are immune to this, it's just a much bigger institution. It's going to take a lot, but it's coming, I think. Unfortunately. Or maybe fortunately. Maybe they need this to happen. Maybe they need to break in order to improve. I don't know. Again, I'm not Catholic either. Mr. Scott, you can look up my peanut butter suggestion in Jerry's Boone's Lounge. I authored in Arthur's Gilded. Okay. Is that recent? Oh, man, I need to go with her there. Now I got to do... You're making me go do work. It's Friday night. It's almost 11 o'clock. Blaine's probably streaming right now. But with that said... Look, look, I saw a quote on here. I saw somebody on Twitter. I can't remember. I wish I'd have saved it. I should have. She was complaining that she met the guy of her dreams, the guy she thought she would marry, and he broke up with her because he found out she was a Calvinist. So they said it wasn't meant to be. That's what I should have said. It wasn't meant to be. So anyway, all right, guys, I'm checking out. You guys have a very safe weekend. All right. Remember, no stream on Monday. Coming back Tuesday. Tuesday and Wednesday. I'm only streaming twice tomorrow night or next week either. So, which I don't like that, but I got cool things to look forward to, right? So, what was it? Do you know where a lot of the ELCA churches went after? Hold on. Do you know where a lot of the ELCA churches went that left after universalism vote? No. Ghost towns? I don't know. I don't think we've talked about it a little bit, Scott, but I can't remember. Link for Blaine? Yeah, I can do link for Blaine. We gonna raid? I don't know how to do a raid. He's doing a League Shadow Legends thing right now. There you go. All right. Now, with that said, everybody, you guys have a good weekend. Have a safe weekend. Love you guys. Everybody. All you guys have been part of this chat. All the guys who and gals. Anybody who's watching this. Anybody who's popping in. Anybody who's catching this on the replay. Dude, just thank you. I'm glad that you found this place. I'm glad that you're finding this entertaining at least. And I can remember you're always welcome to chat here. I'd love to talk to you guys and do whatever. And we're going to continue doing this. And maybe I'll be able to make this show a little bit more professionally run, maybe work it a little bit better. We'll see. So MR, Mr. Scott, Nernaeth, Matt Felty, Emmanuel Osorio, Carl, my boy Carl. I'm going to blow my nose after this. Jeez. Let's see. A lot of comments tonight. Dresden. Nico and Blaine. It's a regular cast of characters. You guys have a good time. Y'all, like I said, have a safe weekend. Good night, and God bless.